if you're working with your physical body or your health or your vitality and energy levels, then the sphere of your radiance is probably the most important place to focus on in your Gene Keys profile. It's also the founder of the Gene Keys, Richard Rudd's, favorite gene key or sphere. So we've been on a journey the past couple weeks. I'm going sphere by sphere. We've already done life's work and evolution, which brings us to our radiance, and we're going to continue to march all the way through the profile. So I'd love for you to stick around, subscribe if you want to see that stuff. So first of all, I want to start talking about our radiance by talking about the ineffable, and specifically 2 words we use to describe the ineffable. And that word just means something that is impossible to put words to, essentially. So we have to do our best as bumbling humans to assign a word to try and convey the meaning. So the first word is love. It's a word that we throw around like crazy. And honestly, we usually think of romantic love or relationship-based love. I like what the Greeks did a little bit better when it comes to love, that they classified things into different types of love. So for example, we've got philos, which is like a friendship-based love. And we've got eros, which is like an erotic love or like the love of a partner, a husband and wife, etc. And then finally, and there's more than this, but we've got what's called agape, which agape is the love of God. It's this kind of divine love. It's the connective tissue of the entire universe. So when I use the word love, I'm not talking about a relational love. I'm talking about this agape love, this love of God. And the same is true for the word light. So the sphere of your radiance contains your inner light. And when we release into the gift of this sphere, it releases that inner light out into the world. However, when I'm saying light here, what I'm not talking about is a light bulb, right? I'm not saying like the light of the sun. It's not visible light. However, there are so many spectrums that we cannot see or hear or feel with our 5 senses. But if we learn to tap into our soul, if we learn to see with eyes of lucidity, we begin to see that light. And that's what I'm talking about. There's a light that is contained within your DNA that we unleash through the sphere of this radiance. It's the light of God. It is divinity coming out into the world. So first, I want to talk about the Gene Keys, right? It's called the Gene Keys because we are looking into our DNA. And it's the belief of the Gene Keys that our DNA holds our specific codes to awakening. And when we learn how to work with those codes, we learn how to move through the world with an open heart, and we discover our purpose and then therefore prosperity. But the DNA also holds something else other than our specific path to awakening, other than our specific dharma. And what it holds is what we call collective karma. And it holds it in what scientists call junk DNA, also known as non-coding DNA. And that non-coding DNA is about 90% of our genome. We don't know what it codes for, and that's why scientists call it junk. Throw it away. But the Gene Keys teaches that that DNA actually holds the collective myth and story of all of Gaia, not just humanity, but all of Gaia, going from, the gases to the rocks to single-celled organisms to plant life to fungus, all of that. That entire evolution and story is contained inside of us. And along with it, all the things that we did. All the wars that we caused, all the people that have starved, all the genocides that have happened, all of that living inside of our junk DNA. That is the collective karma that we are here to work through and transmute. We must work with our own karma, and then eventually we get to a place where we start to serve the whole. And the best way that we can serve the whole is to unwind this collective karma and to set some of this inner light free. There's a story that comes from Kabbalah that essentially describes picture a golden vase. And in the beginning of time, this vase shattered into many, many shards. And humans have the role of discovering these shards and bringing them back into unity. It's what our purpose is here for as humanity. And the way that we bring those shards back into unity is by dealing with this junk DNA. And the way that we deal with it is by unwinding it. It's literally wound around the cells of our being, like the double helix shape that it is, and it's keeping us stuck in suffering. And the way that we begin to unwind that suffering is with what the Gene Keys calls the 7 seals. So if you are familiar with the core wound, the lines of the core wound are the deep wounding of humanity. And the seals are how we undo that wounding. So as an example, the wound of separation, the divine seal that opens that is truth, because when we know the truth, we know that it's impossible to be separate. Or as another example, the city of forgiveness heals guilt. So for each of these deep wounding patterns, there is a divine pattern that helps us to unwind or open. And it's our job to develop the lucidity to be able to see those divine patterns and begin to unlock this collective karma. And as you do that, your light is released out into the world and you begin to shine. And that's a metaphorical shine, meaning that you begin to feel like the world is for you. You begin to feel this lightness again, right? That's another thing with the word light. It also means a lightness, right? A light in weight. And when your inner light begins to come out into the world, metaphorically, you feel light. You feel this sense of ease. But it can also be literal. So yes, there's metaphorical light, but there's also literal light. So if you've ever seen old iconography with halos or this glow behind a master, an enlightened individual, this is their radiance. It spills out into the aura, and there is a physical manifestation of actual light that we can see. So the way that that light shows up is through your aura. And this is both metaphorically and literally. Your aura is this energy field that conveys information, but it conveys information without words. And if you know, I'm sure you've heard before that the vast majority of our communication is done non-verbally, through body language, through tone. And that essentially is what I'm talking about here, except it's even broader than that. It's on an energetic level. It has to do a lot with your intention of how you're moving through the world. Are you thinking, how can I get what's mine? How can I do what's best for me? Or are you thinking, how can I best serve the whole? And what our aura does essentially is it acts like a magnet. And it can either attract or repel, depending on your frequency, the other things frequency that you are interacting with, most commonly a person, but this could be a location, it could be an animal. There's lots of different things that can interact with our aura. And that magnet, when our frequencies match, or when somebody is on our fractal line, so that's another part of this, is when our radiance begins to open, it's all karmic this. So we're gonna be led down paths and roads that bring us to other people who are designed to be affected by our radiance. All of this is being composed by a being much greater than ourselves. And when you start to lean into that trust, you'll start to see that people are coming into your life for a purpose. Either they unlock something in you or you unlock something in them. And that happens through the magnet that is your aura. So when somebody is in your fractal and at a frequency that matches yours, you feel this like draw, like you can't help but move towards that person and engage with them. However, the same thing can be true on the opposite end, where this is somebody not on your fractal line, you do not match their frequency, and you want to stay as far away from them as humanly possible. I always use the example of walking into like a waiting room in a doctor's office, and one person you're completely drawn to, the other person you're completely turned off from, even though it has nothing to do with like their clothing or their appearance or the way they smell or anything like that. It's just something inside of you. And as your radiance releases, your attractor field begins to shift. And all of these different allies and situations and people begin to get pulled into your life. And that's kind of what I was talking about when I said it's all karmic. How part of it is, yes, your inner light is opening to the world. The other part is that the world is bringing things that help you open your inner light and then therefore open the inner light in others. So if we take a look at the Gene Keys profile at the bottom, we've got the sphere of your purpose, and then that comes up into your attractor field. Now, if we just draw a quick line over here, this is where your radiance lives in the profile. So you can see your radiance and your attractor field are really close together. And I don't think that is by mistake, because it is our aura that is the biggest contributor to what is happening with our attractor field. And then the other component of that attractor field is how do I respond to what is drawn in. Next thing that I want you to know about is that the radiance is the first, if you do the golden path in the order that it was originally intended, which is to start with the activation sequence, then your radiance is the first unconscious sphere that we come into contact with. So what does that mean? If you've been following along, we already did our life's work and our evolution, and those are both conscious, meaning they are in our awareness. We're able to see them. We are much less blind to them. However, when we go across the pathway of breakthrough, so we've got the sphere of evolution over here, and then coming out of evolution, over here is our radiance, and this pathway here is breakthrough. And as you go across that pathway of breakthrough, you are crossing the veil, is the language that we use in the Gene Keys, which means we are going to the other side, the place that we don't remember. We drink from the river of forgetting when we come into this world, when we are incarnated. We have this deep connection to all that is and to God, and then when, as part of our journey to come here, we drink from that river of forgetting and we totally lose sight of all of that. We lose memory of all of that. And that happens as we're crossing over this pathway of breakthrough. So your radiance and your purpose, the next sphere down, are both unconscious, meaning that they are deeper than your life's work and your evolution. However, one thing that I want you to remember is that this wisdom is holographic in nature. So what holographic means is that everything is contained in everything else. It's fractal geometry instead of Euclidean geometry. And because it's holographic, even though this sphere is unconscious, by focusing on it and understanding the shadow and the gift, it can help to unlock the more conscious spheres, your evolution and your life's work. So I was talking to somebody the other day and they were putting zero effort into their unconscious spheres because they were like, well, it's unconscious. What is that possibly going to do? And on a deeper level, it is going, because of the holographic nature of this wisdom, it's going to impact the conscious sphere. So it's important to focus on these, even though they're a little bit deeper. And they have more to do, because they are unconscious, with your way of being in the world, as opposed to your way of doing in the world. So this is like a quality that you bring. Like, are you funny? Are you happy? Are you serious, but in a pragmatic kind of way? You know, like it's less 5 sense oriented and more like a quality of consciousness. Now, the next thing that I want you to understand, sorry about the dizzying circle there, is that your radiance and your purpose, these two keys here, are a set of what are called programming partners. So I'm going to write that down here. And we already did a talk about the programming partners in the last video, so I'm not going to really get into what they are. However, I do think it's important to know radiance and purpose are another set of programming partners. In other words, we got to make sure that we are seeing those two spheres on some level as a unified field of energy. It's this field, in this particular field, these programming partners, what they do is they give us a sense of inner stability. I'm not sure if you can see this down here, but what I just wrote is inner stability, or they give us inner instability. That's what these programming partners do for us, because the pathway here that connects our radiance to our purpose, this is the pathway of core stability. And that is an inner stability, an inner knowing that you're gonna be okay because you are supported by a higher being, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it. However, the programming partners, if we're in the shadow on either side, you are going to have inner instability. You are not going to feel safe. You are not going to feel protected. You are not going to feel like life is going to work out. That's coming from this field of your radiance and your purpose. When we unlock the gifts of our radiance and our purpose, those programming partners, we do come into core stability and we end up in inner stability. I know that I can't do anything to mess this up. Let me tell you how freeing of a feeling that really is. And consistency of stability is what leads to your improvements in physical health. So I started this whole thing off by saying that the sphere of your radiance has everything to do with your health, your vitality, your energy. And when that set of programming partners is in the gift and we find that stability, we stop sabotaging ourselves. I'm sure you've felt it over and over again. We get this pattern that I'll call X. And when that pattern comes up, it causes this extreme discomfort inside of our body. So to handle that discomfort, we do some activity. Why? To mitigate the discomfort that we're feeling. And what that ends up in is chaos and a repeating pattern. Because you're not actually addressing X, right? You're doing something to try and deal with X without actually identifying what it is. And what we've got to do is we've got to turn towards X, and we've got to face it, and we've got to learn from it. We've got to listen to it. And we've got to start to shift our behavior. Because otherwise we just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, and we make ground, right? We take 10 steps forward and then we engage in this self-sabotaging behavior. It brings us into chaos, and then we reset this process of releasing this inner light. And so we get stuck in this wheel of like, it gets really close, but then the universe throws us something to learn from, to shift how we respond, but we don't do it. We respond in the same patterned way that we always have. We create the chaos and we cut ourselves off at the knee as we repeat the pattern again. So we've got to work to release these habits. And the way that that happens is through the stability, because when you feel the ease, you don't have to go to these coping strategies that you've had to use your entire life because you felt so unsafe. The other thing that happens, because this is tied so much to our health, vitality, and energy, is that you get full breath for the first time in probably quite some time. You will be shocked at how limited your breathing will be when it actually opens. At least I was shocked when that happens. Your breath just gets full. You can breathe into your diaphragm. You can breathe into your belly. You feel your lungs and your ribs expand. It totally changes. Also, your spine becomes more straight. We're not humped over anymore. We're not hiding anymore. We're not protecting our heart anymore. That light is spilling out of us. And the light of life returns again as everything around you begins to shine as inner light. That's ultimately what Radiance is all about. You get this health, this vitality, this energy because you see the light in yourself and in everything around you. And you start to attune yourself to that light. And it begins to shine forth from inside of you. And the more you do it, the bigger your aura gets, the more you attract in, and the more life opens up. You can see how beautiful this sphere is and the potential that it holds for you. So thank you for being here. Next video will be about the sphere of the purpose. My intention is to do it at the beginning of next week. Also, we've got a call this week on Thursday at noon Eastern time. I call it a wisdom call. It's an opportunity to come connect with me on Zoom, ask questions, talk about this stuff. It's fun. So hopefully I'll see you there. I don't have anything to sell you. All that stuff is free because all my paid stuff is full. So thank you for being here. Talk to you next time.